Oh,
Garrett, would you tell us about Monday, the LSU Turning Point event? How did it go? I wasn't there, but I'm sure you were in the middle of everything.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. It was so cool to see. One of the coolest things I think about this Turning Point tour and everything they're doing is one, not only continuing it after the tragic assassination, but at the root of it, like I said, it's bringing people to Christ. And I think that's the cool thing is we love our conservative values. I'm a huge conservative. But at the root of my conservatism is my faith. And I think, Charlie always said this quote, culture is downstream from politics and politics is downstream from the heart, that you have to find it in yourself first and what you believe before you can know what we're conserving. So I think being able to show all these young people, get them in the same room, and listen to these behemoths in the movement such as Allie Beth Stuckey and Governor Jeff Landry, and hear them not only talk about conservatism, but their convictions to the faith is such a cool thing to see. We had over 1,500 people in attendance. It was a packed house. The line was wrapping around the building. People were outside waiting all day. So the community really showed up, and it was truly a blessing.
thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Meet the world's first living, full-spectrum, certified organic CBDA hemp extract. Ness's hemp oil was extracted from seed to bottle without chemicals, solvents, or heavy metals, and it surpasses world-class standards for purity. This pure and powerful CBDA has been proven to reduce aches and pains, ease mental tension, and promote better sleep. To get yours today, visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom, where we are grounded in faith and the Constitution, and where we are committed to giving voice to truth, living with courage, and taking action. It's Thursday, October 30th. It's 10 a.m. Central, and I'm Danielle Walker. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, the watchdog in chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander. We are coming to you live on Voice of the People, USA TV and Radio Network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. If you're catching us later, you can listen on our podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast. Well, our guest today, I'm very excited about, and it looks like he may have gotten kicked out, so let me just bring him in now. Let's see. Hey, Garrett, we got you back.
Yeah, it seemed to have kicked me out. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. Our guest today is Garrett DeViney. He serves as the Bayou Field Representative for Turning Point USA, working with college students across Louisiana and southern Mississippi to grow conservative leadership on campus. He's passionate about faith, freedom, and empowering young Americans to get involved and make a difference. Welcome to the show, Garrett. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle and Chris. I'm honored to be here.
You bet.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Before we get into the conversation today, let me read the scripture of the day. It's 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. And the Lord sent me to this scripture this morning, and I just think it's so apt for where we are. It says, "When we could bear it no longer, we decided that we would remain in Athens and send Timothy in our place. He's our beloved brother and co-worker with God in preaching the gospel. We knew he would strengthen your faith and encourage your hearts so that no one would be shaken by these persecutions. For you know that we are destined for this. In fact, when we were with you, we forewarned you suffering and persecution is coming. And so it has happened, as you well know. For this reason, when I could endure it no longer, I sent our brother to find out if your faith was still strong. For I was concerned that the tempter had somehow enticed you and our labor would have been in vain. But now Timothy has just returned to us and brought us the terrific news of your faith and love. He informed us that you still hold us dear in your hearts and that you long to see us as much as we long to see you. So, our dear brothers and sisters, in the midst of all our distress and difficulties, your steadfastness of faith has greatly encouraged our hearts. We feel alive again as long as we know that you're standing firm in the Lord. And this is exactly what we're seeing arise across America, and especially with the youth. We're seeing courageous ones who love the Lord stand up, not bowing to fear, not bowing to the mocking, to the name calling, and the accusations that we're seeing run rampant. This kind of courageous faith, this kind of resilience in the face of intense persecution and accusation lies, is what is required to turn the nation around. And in large part, we can point to Charlie Kirk, I think, as the model and inspiration for that boldness arising.
Yeah, we can point to Charlie Kirk, Danielle, and we can point to young men and women across the country who he has inspired, including our guest today, Garrett DeViney. Garrett, it's such a pleasure to have you on the State of Freedom, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here, especially in the midst of all that's going on. It's important to talk about it, especially for our home state. So I'm truly honored to be here.
You're in the fight for sure. When I was reading about you this morning, a thought occurred to me. I bet you Garrett has a moment in his life or an experience in his life where he first learned about Charlie Kirk and where he first began to be inspired by Charlie Kirk. I'm so curious to hear your experience, how you first learned about Charlie and how he's influenced you.
Yes, sir, absolutely. So, I should say politics or the conservative movement has always been a real passion of mine. These ideals were something that I was raised firmly on. My family is a long line of civil servants. And so I grew up around, strong men and women who instilled these values upon me. So when I got a little earlier, it was almost a natural thing. Charlie was the big thing on social media at the time. And I'd say around the coming of my senior year in high school, that was about all anybody could talk about, especially in Louisiana. I think we're lucky while of course we have problem spots like New Orleans and places where, we're not maybe the most popular group. I think we're lucky to where most of our biggest problem is apathy. So you do have a good bit of people on your side. At least I did around me in high school. And so it was kind of just the talk between my friends. I was lucky enough to have an awesome group of guys growing up that I was super close with. And we all really just connected over, Charlie destroying college students on campus. It was fun to watch. He kept people connected. And he did it kindly through Christ. And, I used the word destroying, but it really was, trying to bring people to Christ. And I think that's what hit so hard with me.
Yeah. And the only one doing it, he was really a pioneer. I can't think of anyone else who was routinely going on college campuses and directly challenging, as you said, in a civil but in a very firm way, the prevailing narrative on college campuses. And maybe there were others, but certainly none that had the impact that he has had.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. You have names like Steven Crowder and some people older in the movement who tried to do this change your mind, prove me wrong style on campuses, but it really didn't compare to when Charlie stepped on campus for the first time. And I think it really does come back to the point being it's what his intentions were. It wasn't you're wrong. I'm going to show everyone you're wrong. I'm going to get a clip off of this. It's going to be awesome. It was truly out of love. The person on the other side of the mic was a brother or sister in Christ, and he had thought or knew that he had found the light in life. He was living this free life. He had a wonderful family. And I think that he truly believed that all he was trying to do was get the person on the other side to see that light. And so I think it's really the intention behind him that, drew people so close to him. It was almost just like a natural calling. And I think we reacted to that.
Yeah. Excellent point.
I just think the way that you just said it so perfectly, Garrett, because as much as on the outside, the tents can look the same, right? Prove me wrong, tent can look the same.
Yep.
But you can judge somebody by their fruit, and their fruit comes from their intentions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're seeing that now.
I'll never forget on this issue, watching the way Charlie Kirk responded to a particular student. I don't even know what school it was, but I think they were transgender. I think they had gone through the process of transitioning, for lack of a better word. And they started off in a way that was, very hostile to him. But he got him to a point where they actually asked him, what do you think that I should do in order to come to peace with this or whatever? And the way he responded was in such a gracious and loving way. He said, God didn't create you with the body that you have and the mind that you have for you to be at war with your body. Doesn't mean you don't have struggles. It doesn't mean you don't have some confusion along the way. But the prayer that I would have for you would be that you would come to a point where you love yourself and love your body rather than be at war with your body that God gave you. And I don't think I've ever heard a response that profound. I mean, this is supposed to be a political advocate, but he's so seamlessly infused his faith with his public advocacy. And I think that's really what set him apart. What say you, Garrett?
Yeah, I mean, it really gives me chills to hear, especially since the tragedy of everything that happened on September 10th. There's been so much demonization of Charlie and his beliefs. And it's easy to do it now. It's easy to demonize somebody when they can't defend themselves, especially when you can go through hundreds and hundreds of hours of content and pull whatever you want out of context on a lot of touchy subjects.
Yeah.
But I think you summed it up perfectly that it's exactly that. People want to call him out to be homophobic or all this stuff. And it was none of that. It was truly that he was based in scripture. He knew what he believed for himself. And it wasn't to demonize you, it wasn't to tell you to get away. You're transgender. He wasn't scared of anybody. He wanted to bring you closer to the light. And if that meant, you being the way you are and loving yourself before you can, see through clearly enough that you need to find God in your life, then he understood that that's what it took. It was all about meeting the other person on the side where they were at. And I think that's really the most important thing. There have been hundreds of different attempts to bring people to Christ over the years and over our entire history as a civilization. And I think, you know, be bold to say that I think Charlie hit it on the head, that it's all about just meeting that person where they were at. It's not standing outside on Bourbon Street and demonizing you. It's not accepting whatever. There's two sides to the spectrum. And so, especially with somebody who's a transgender, just accepting them and saying, hey, you are what you are, love yourself, and then that'll lead you to Christ. And that's all that Christ wants for you. It shows the genuineness, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now tell us, Garrett, how did you get involved with Turning Point?
Yes, ma'am. So I went to LSU for 2 years. Well, let me back up. I was born and raised in Metairie, Louisiana. I went to St. Martin's Episcopal High School. Grew up loving the conservative movement, like I said, was very strong in my faith, went to church every Sunday. But you kind of find yourself going through the steps and the motions and not finding what it means to you. So since I was so passionate about all these things, when I went to college, I really had the opportunity to start realizing what I thought of the world, what I thought of certain things. And I just found myself really unhappy in the way my college experience was going. Which is interesting to say. I was the president of my fraternity by sophomore year. In all intensive purposes, I was on top of the world, had all the friends in the world, but it just didn't feel like myself. Felt like I was constantly changing who I was to fit the mold, and that being classes with papers and changing my viewpoints on stuff like that to meet a grade, as well as just in social circles and stuff like that, bending morals that I didn't think, wasn't who I was. So I dropped out, found a job at Turning Point and applied when I saw that there was a position opening in Louisiana, or to be the representative for Louisiana and Southern Mississippi. And it was kind of just, a come to Jesus moment. I always knew that I wanted to give back to the community that had given so much to me and my family. I love our state, would never want to go anywhere. And I think it's really important that we encourage the youngest and the brightest to stay here, and to make our state better. And so it kind of just the pieces all work together. I got a chance to do all that, work with young leaders, and so I jumped on the opportunity. And it's been quite a hectic 2 months. Or 3 months,
No,
going on 3 months now. That's for sure. But it's been the blessing of a lifetime.
That's awesome.
You have one of the things I think is so impressive about you, Garrett, is the fact that you would make a decision of that magnitude in college. Even though now there's not quite the pressure on young people to take the traditional route, there's still a lot of pressure, a lot of societal pressure for young people to take the traditional college route, pretend that they know everything that they want to do. They have a whole future mapped out when many of them don't have a clue what they're doing. They
Yeah.
don't even know why they're in college. And many of them probably would be well recommended to take the route that you took. So here's my question to you. It's a two part. You talked about academic pressure. You talked about the pressure for you to try to become something that you were not in order to be able to achieve a grade or to be accepted academically in college. I guarantee you that's a lot of students go through that. Talk to us a little bit about the pressure that you were feeling because it goes to the prevailing narrative, frankly, on most college campuses. And then how did you find the backbone and the courage to just dump that aside and move on to something completely different? I find it so interesting.
Well, thank you, sir. Yeah. So, and I'll say this, LSU's the least of it. I was honestly blessed. And I think that's kind of to put it into perspective perfectly that if I was feeling it at LSU, it was almost like I could only imagine what people are feeling at Loyola and Tulane.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was really just I had some undergrad, or I mean, some graduate students. Your first 2 years of college is your English and your maths taught by students who are working on getting their master's or postgrad degrees themselves. And so I found a lot of English classes taught by, people who are there to get their English majors. Alongside gender studies degrees, it was just that my post grad professors who were there as students themselves seem to have, a current skin in the game as to how the courses went, as to the
Hmm.
material that was accepted. And a lot of it was also just as well as the stuff that they made very clear from the beginning that would be openly discussed in the classroom and that I would have to respect. Pronouns were a big thing, having to call a transgender person by their preferred name. It just, and again, it's not that I want to cause trouble or anything like that. It was just I started to notice that these things that I was felt in my heart were wrong, or not even wrong, or just I had questions about, were kind of told like, it's normal. It was supposed, all the youth was supposed to just play along with it. And
Yeah.
so that really set alarms off for me. And so it really started at 2 years of trying to figure out how I felt about a lot of things. It kind of brought a lot of questions about the world as a whole. It brought a lot of anxiety. And I think that's what we need to realize is that it does do that to young people. All these questions we're bringing up contrary to what is taught in the Bible and what our nation was founded on, it is bringing stress and unnecessary anguish into people's lives that we don't need. And so a long-winded answer to your question. It was really just that. So that's what made me notice that I really wanted to take that leap. I had talked to peers at other colleges and really just started to understand that this was something that everybody was facing.
And
So
Garrett,
there is Garrett, then in your view, based upon your experience in college and probably based upon the interaction you've had with many students even after you quit college,
Yes, sir.
there is a prevailing narrative in your view that is contrary to conservative thinking, constitutional thinking, and basic common sense.
Oh, without a doubt, 100%. And I think a lot of it is bureaucratic hurdles put up for no reason, just for people to stay in power. A
yeah.
lot of I hate to draw a bad light on organizations as a whole, and I don't. I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of the problem that we see are guidance counselors who are in charge of these student organizations, and just a lot of unchecked lower levels that are able to enforce what they want and what they want to be taught without it even necessarily getting to higher up in the university or higher admin. I would like to think a lot of times that if it did, whether personal belief or not, the higher admin would realize, the problem in a lot of cases. And in some cases, we do see it corrected. Absolutely. It is not just that you have to believe a certain way or say certain things, and if you don't, you're kind of like the weird kid. I'm perfectly fine with people thinking I'm the weird person for loving my country, but it's not that at all. It's that students are actively being targeted
Yeah.
and for their political beliefs on campus. I was tabling at Nichols University the other week, and a student came up screaming that Charlie Kirk was now in hell, that Donald Trump was a pedophile, and just in these students' faces for no reason. And so, yes, it is.
And it's not
They're
coming,
absolutely
and
targets.
Garrett, it's not coming from, I would presume that if these students are from the state of Louisiana, they probably did not get those ideas at home. And I'm not saying that kids all grow up in staunch conservative families, but I guarantee you they were not taught at home that it is a biological reality that a boy can become a girl or that a girl can become a boy. So it's obvious that the indoctrination is encouraging, is being encouraged on the college campuses.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would also, Garrett, I want to pick up on what you said about, I had to write papers that were basically slanted a certain way to get a
Yeah.
certain grade. That is a demonic tactic. I think the first time I realized this, if you remember back in 2020 when Hillary Clinton went all over TV and was demanding people say that no, was it 2016, was demanding people say that that the election was stolen or
Right.
something like that. Anyway, she wanted everybody to say what it was she believed. And I was like, wait a second, why is that? Why does she care so much? And it's because it is literally a demonic entity that is causing people, trying to get people to bow to that. When I think about the coercion, it's compromise, right? And you write those words, they're your words now. You say those words, you say those
Exactly.
pronouns, they're your words now. This is your agreement with a demonic entity,
Such
and
a
that's
good
how this
point,
is
Danielle.
spread.
That is such a good point. You may start off saying that I'm only doing this as a means to an end. I'm
Yep.
only doing this in order to be able to get the degree that I want. But Danielle, that is so profound. You start saying things, you start repeating things, and there comes a point where you start to they get into your spirit and into your
Yeah.
soul. The compromise leads to greater compromise and you end up believing it. I've never looked at it that way, Danielle, but I guess that's how the indoctrination really
Faith comes
occurs.
by hearing. You have the faith to believe that a transgender can be a real thing
Yeah.
because you heard it from yourself.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think it's all intentional. If you look back in history, the original communist parties went to college campuses and scheduled and held marches through the original universities, the original Ivy League universities. Communist parties held often paid from China, and it goes on and on. They intentionally went to college campuses because they knew that that's where our brightest and our most willing to learn is. I think that's the saddest
Yeah.
thing, is that it's that's where you go to send your child, or when you're older you go to learn for yourself. And it's really, you have to go in good faith, you have to be open to learn, and then you get taken advantage of. And to your point, it's
Exactly. Yeah,
they
there's a
put you in a
level of
bind.
vulnerability there, Garrett. There's a level of vulnerability there that they prey upon. It seems like they prey upon. I want to get your thoughts on something, and you as well, Danielle. I just saw yesterday Barack Obama, who I think did more to infect racial poison into our body politic than any other national figure in the last 50 years. I think he had a poisonous effect on our culture. Yesterday, they were doing somebody was I think they were doing an interview with him, and he was talking about speech. He was talking about speech, particularly speech on social media, but I guarantee you he would apply it to college campuses as well. And he was saying that there's we have to begin regulating speech, on social media, and we have to be able to determine what's true and what's not. And then what really alarmed me was when he said, and this has to involve a component of government regulatory constraint. And I'm thinking to myself, this is exactly what our founding fathers fought and died to fight against.
Yeah.
Barack, who makes the determination about whether something is true or false, opinion or truth? Who do you entrust with that responsibility? And he was saying it's the government. Garrett, is that not one of the most alarming, dangerous things you've ever heard?
It is, Chris. That's absolutely ridiculous and harmful, and really harmful to our youth to hear. It's ridiculous. What we are told is true and wrong comes from one place, and that place is Scripture, the Gospel, and the Bible. We have one truth. We were taught it from a beginning, and we were taught that our rights were endowed from God and not our government. So my First Amendment right to say what I want comes from God, not the government. And no matter what Barack Obama thinks he can do, that's not going to change at all. So I think that's ridiculous. It's
I think it's very
absolutely,
and it's very revealing. I mean, this is a guy who taught constitutional law in a law
yeah.
school. You'd think he would be familiar with the First Amendment and the purpose of the First Amendment. And for him just to make a statement like that, I mean, the fact that someone would think that, much less make a statement, the idea that the government gets to be the arbiter of what's right, what's wrong, what speech is acceptable. And that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of attitude that your students face on college campuses, what you've
Yeah.
been talking about here.
But exactly, Chris, they'll know you by your fruit. Look at the fruit of Barack Obama. Look at the absolute destruction and division he's brought to our country. And I would say let's take a look at who his students were and how they're ruling now as attorneys and judges.
They're the
Yeah.
product of
Yeah,
precisely that philosophy, Danielle.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it was a time when everything wasn't as mainstream or thrown on the media. And so I think we have absolutely zero question now about what Barack Obama was teaching in those classrooms back when he was teaching the Constitution to people. And it wasn't the Constitution, it was the left wing indoctrination Constitution
That's
that
right.
they love to teach to people, that it's you have to believe what we believe. You have freedom of speech until it's contrary to our belief. You have all these rights until it starts to ask the wrong questions. And it's just not how it works.
So well
And so,
said.
yeah.
You have the right to speak until you say something that we disagree with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what Chris and I were talking about before the show was that, everyone does have freedom of speech, but you also do have the freedom to receive the consequences of people reacting to your stupidity or your whatever speech you're bringing forth. So I don't know. It's amazing to see people want to expose themselves as ignorant as they are, as anti-constitutional as they are, especially someone who's a former president. But
Yeah, so true, Danielle.
It's
So
sad.
true.
it
You
is.
know, it was, I think it was Voltaire who said, I may absolutely hate and despise what you're saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Well, you could actually revise that with regard to how, college administrators approach free speech and say, I may disagree with what you say, and I will do everything in my power to crush and suppress your right to say it. And that's kind of what's happening on the campuses.
Yeah.
That is absolutely right. That's exactly what's happening on the campuses. And it's hypocritical because if it were an attempt at the other way, which it would never be, but it would
Right.
be all out war, especially you see coming out of the War Department right now, all these all the left wing journalists walking out because Pete Hegseth passed an order saying that you can't just say whatever you want coming out from the Pentagon while you're working in the Pentagon. So it's things like that. It's the same thing with Jimmy Kimmel. When you're working for a private organizations, you do have consequences and you can incite violence and all these good things. And then when not, you can say whatever you want. But, to your point and to the quote Barack made, it's absolute lunacy and hypocrisy. And so, like we said, you really are the fruit of everything you say.
Yeah. On the issue of speech, Garrett, I know you're familiar with this because I think you posted something on social media about it. Loyola University in New Orleans has rejected Turning Point's effort to affiliate at Loyola based upon some protests from some students who were, accusing Charlie Kirk of being a bigot, of being a racist, and all the rest of it. So they've been rejected there. Now, I'll set this up this way. I believe Danielle and I were talking about this before the show. I think a purely private institution has the right, however vile, however dumb, to decide who gets to come on their campus and form organizations, because the First Amendment exists to protect against government suppression, not the suppression of private institutions. That doesn't mean that people cannot protest. It doesn't mean people can't send emails to the president. It doesn't mean that a lot of pressure can't be exerted there. But from a constitutional perspective, I suppose they have the right to do that. But what are your thoughts on the idea that any university that is supposed to be dedicated to the idea of pure academic freedom, freedom of expression, would just peremptorily suppress and censor, an organization like Turning Point USA and just say, sorry, you can't come here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to look at it. First of all, going back to my rights are not from the government, they're from God. And so you're not suppressing the government, you're suppressing my rights as a Christian and my faith as a tuition paying student when not allowing me to express those beliefs. And so that's where I'll start. But and especially coming from a Christian, Catholic to be exact, institution itself, I find it interesting. Right. But to your point, they are a private institution, and you can, being a private institution, do what you want. And I support that right 100%. I do think we need to make sure that the institutions are 100% private before making that call, and not subsidized by the government, not taking grants for students, not paying scholarships for half of the institution. So I think we really need to take a good look at how much subsidy and how much money is actually coming from the state and federal level before calling these institutions private and defending their rights to do what they can.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Great point. There comes a point, and Danielle's the one who made that point this morning. There comes a point when they're really quasi public institutions because they're being sustained and subsidized so much by public money. And at that point, maybe the Constitution is implicated more. But what do you say in response to this decision based upon these protests from these students that are saying that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA were a bigoted organization? What would you say to those students there? What would you say to the president of Loyola University?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous and quite sad, to be honest with you. I've done a lot of digging at the founding of the Jesuits and St. Ignatius Loyola this week. I'd argue more than it seems like a lot of the administration at Loyola has done ever in their lifetime. Because taking one quick look at what they believe and what St. Ignatius Loyola believes, being a soldier who was wounded in battle in the Spanish army, bedridden for a year, growing stronger in his faith, I'd say that it's exactly, the story of Charlie Kirk in a different sense. Somebody who was being constantly ridiculed and really had to grow in his faith through hardship. And so I would say that, whether you can pull all the quotes and words out of context you want, you're not holding yourself to a fair standard, saying you support free speech and want to grow the best minds of our community and support diversity and all these things. You're just lying to yourself when saying that, because you're not. I would be perfectly fine, as hard as it is to say, to have been given an actual no through an actual peer-to-peer process that I saw was handled properly and the students just didn't want it. I can bite that bullet. If a whole campus tells me they don't want an organization, fine. They go to a private organization. To your point, they have that right. That's not what this was. There was over 100 students who packed this Senate hearing. The young ladies who were on the exec of Loyola trying to start the chapter were given 5 minutes to speak and prove a point. And then they were asked to leave the room, where the entire student body had the floor to say whatever they want. And at that point, it was just a smear campaign to bring home the decision that student government wanted before the Senate trial even happened. It was just clear, and that's the sad part, is that it was clear that they got what they wanted. A lot of the senators were quoted saying the meeting was rewarding. It just doesn't add up.
Yeah. Well, and my question is, why should the most ignorant among us make those decisions?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect. That's
So I know what you would have asked, Garrett. I have a feeling that if you had been there and you had had some of your allies present at this meeting, perhaps you would have asked, what evidence could you provide? Some evidence, actual evidence, and factual data that supports your allegation that Charlie Kirk or any member of Turning Point USA is a bigot or a racist? Could you provide some evidence? And if they had had to do that and had been actually held to that standard, perhaps they would have come to a different conclusion.
Yeah, I would like to think they would have. There's always the point that in that scenario, even if they had to show evidence, they would have been showing it to 100 other of themselves. And so I think it was a lost cause from the beginning. But you're absolutely right that if we go into this the way that the universities promised and the way that I think that they would, I would hope that Loyola would be appalled to see that the way the Senate hearing was held. And so I would hope that the way they intend for these Senate hearings to be held and the way that this process is supposed to go is exactly what you said, Chris, to where the students should be able to, one, face their accusers and answer to these questions and not just be smeared. It became a personal thing. They were told they were guilty by association, as well as a litany of other things that just made no sense. The usual racist, fascist, um, and so
Unbelievable.
yeah, it is, and like you said, completely baseless.
Who
Yeah.
would you pick, Garrett? If let's just say hypothetically, you got a call tomorrow and said, "Okay, Garrett, we're gonna have a open debate on the campus. Everybody's invited. Garrett, you and two of your allies at Turning Point USA that you're close to will come on, and then three Loyola students will be on the other side, and then there will be two. How about two liberal administrators and then two conservative administrators, true conservative. If you could find one at Loyola, you might have to import one, but and they would judge the merits of the argument. Who would you? I'm just curious. Who would you pick to be on your side?
That's a tough question.
I'm talking about your friends in Turning Point.
Yeah. Yeah, so absolutely. I would probably, go with the easy answer. I'd bring out the rest of the reps along the Gulf region.
There you
You know,
go.
the Gulf, I don't think people know this, and it's pretty cool. The Gulf is the only territory and turning point that is 100% a bunch of guys. And so, while of course we would have no problem with a lady being on our team, it has been pretty fun. We call ourselves the Gulf Fraternity. Our
There you
regional
go.
manager as well as guys. So it's been pretty fun. We're been very close and we've had a lot of team bonding. So I would absolutely go with them.
You could go and you would be very confident going in there and speaking the truth.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think that's, the point to make is that there are 50 other of me around the nation doing the same thing, fighting for students. And arguably others are better than I am at the job. We have these young patriots who have dedicated their life to this, have gone through the training, they constantly do the homework, and are prepared to help these students win these battles on campus. And that's what we're doing. And we're going to win Loyola soon, without a doubt. We've been working behind the scenes diligently. As y'all have seen, there's been a lot of national press come out about the issue. And so I think Loyola will smarten up soon, and hopefully when we get the appeal in, that they'll change their mind.
I hope
Ga-
so. Yeah.
Garrett, would you tell us about Monday, the LSU Turning Point event? How did it go? I wasn't there, but I'm sure you were in the middle of everything.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. It was so cool to see. One of the coolest things I think about this Turning Point tour and everything they're doing is, one, not only continuing it after the tragic assassination, but at the root of it, like I said, it's bringing people to Christ. And I think that's the cool thing is we love our conservative values. I'm a huge conservative, but at the root of my conservatism is my faith. And I
Yeah.
think, Charlie always said this quote: culture is downstream from politics, and politics is downstream from the heart, that you have to find it in yourself first and what you believe before you can know what we're conserving. So I think being able to show all these young people, get them in the same room and listen to these behemoths in the movement, such as Allie Beth Stuckey and Governor Jeff Landry, and hear them not only talk about conservatism, but their convictions to the faith, is such a cool thing to see. We had over 1,500 people in attendance. It was a packed house. The line was wrapping around the building. People were outside waiting all day. So the community really showed up, and it was truly a blessing.
That's awesome.
Did you ever know Amanda Eberts?
Yes, I do know Amanda. We have gotten to know each other kind of in the transition period as I start to take this job. She's well loved around the organization, that's for sure.
Yeah. Very, very. I've always been very impressed with her. I had a chance to see her testify at the legislature, and she would be one that I would suggest you might pick
Yeah,
when you go into battle,
yeah, she's
because she's
awesome.
a absolutely outstanding person. Are you familiar with what's going on at Tulane, or the process now as far as getting the?
Yeah, yes, sir. So what happened at Tulane is once we applied for the RSO status, which is your registered student organization status, the process you have to go through it, same thing we're going through at Loyola right now. Tulane took a different approach, and I can't say for sure that this is the reason. However, the day after the students submitted their application for registered student organization at Tulane, the university came out saying that they were hereby pausing the entire process for all student
Come
organizations
on.
going forward.
I'm sure that's no coincidence.
So we're not just going to
Right.
chill.
So
We're just not going to chill the speech of conservative organizations. We're going
we're
to
going to do
chill the
all.
speech of every organization, just so we can avoid having to make a real decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're kind of just in limbo there. It's a tough position to be in. A lot of, if any Tulane alums are watching, that's the thing to do is write an email showing your distaste with their decision. If you're a donor, stop sending money, because that's really the only way to get these private institutions to listen is hit their bank accounts.
That's what you.
That's right.
That's what Danielle, insightful Danielle, said before the show.
Yeah,
Get some big donors to just quit giving.
it's
Yep.
absolutely correct.
Absolutely. How's the response been in the last couple months, Garrett? Have you seen a lot of uptick in Louisiana and Southern Mississippi interest in high schools? Obviously, these universities have some level of interest, even though they're facing some headwinds in terms
Yeah.
of getting the organization stood up.
Oh, it's been amazing. I'm very close with the high school rep, Yvonne. She's wonderful. She has been doing an amazing job covering ground at a lot of these high schools, especially fighting these big high schools in New Orleans to get on campus. When, if you're from New Orleans and you're asked where you go to school, it means high school. So I think it's a really, it's really important that she's doing that work in New Orleans to get those big high schools covered. But on the college part, yeah, absolutely. We just hit 20 universities with chapters between Louisiana and Southern Mississippi. We've got all the big ones. And so the community response has been absolutely amazing. It's just, you have these small pockets with a microphone that want to tear you down.
So these Loyola and Tulane, then, in your experience, are sort of aberrations, which is a good sign, right? That you're
Yeah.
not meeting this kind of resistance universally.
No, yeah, I'll go back to earlier. I think our biggest problem is apathy in Louisiana, and I'm hopeful that that can continue to be our biggest problem because I much rather fight a bunch of apathetic students who are like, yeah, I love Trump, but why would I come help because the conservative movement's fine? That's an easier mindset to break other than I hate conservatives or I hate everything you stand for. So we are lucky. A lot of it is, trying to find ways to show the closeted conservative who already holds all these beliefs and doesn't think there's a need to fight, that there is a problem and that there is a way you can get involved in the state and around your home. And so we are lucky that Loyola and them are the outliers in the situation for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched Erica Kirk's speech last night at the Turning Point event at Ole Miss, which was massive, absolutely massive. I thought she did an excellent job of trying to shake people awake and say, if we can't motivate you, if this kind of persecution can't motivate you, there's nothing that I can ever say that will motivate you. What did you think about last night's event? Erica's comments. I know I thought JD did an excellent job.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. My coworker, the Dixie rep, Jacob Lawrence, did a wonderful job putting on that event. And yeah, Erica Kirk is so amazing. She's such an amazing woman. We're so lucky to have her as the CEO of our organization right now. There have been a lot of questions, but she has without a doubt showed time and time again her unwavering faith. And so for her to stand up there last night and, like you said, in front of so many students and lovers of Charlie for the first time since all this has happened, other than the memorial, it is truly something amazing. And she is right. If this persecution of somebody who was standing on debating on college campuses, fighting for the freedom for you and me to speak, whether we had disagreeing opinions or not, if we can kill that person for his views, that means they want to kill all of us for all of our views. And so I can only imagine how hard it is for her to do that. She's an amazing woman, such a great leader. And you're absolutely right. If that doesn't shake up the youth, I really don't know what will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the idea that what about them? They're planning I was very heartened by this, that they're planning an alternate Super Bowl halftime show, right?
Yeah.
Which apparently is really, really resonating with people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome. I'm excited to see what more comes of that. I know the staff has been like sitting at our phones looking for speaker drops like everybody else has. We are ecstatic just to see that take place. And what a cool time to be a part of the organization is what we just keep telling ourselves. The things they're doing are amazing and just really skyrocketing Charlie's vision. And so to do it for the halftime show is the best way possible. I don't see why you wouldn't. I think it's silly that Bad Bunny is, the halftime performer as it is. But even if not, I think it's even cooler that we're going to do a halftime show that's based on America and, celebrating our common culture. And that's what it should be. Football's America's sport. Everybody, it's probably the most watched. Everybody flocks to the Super Bowl. So why not celebrate our country that allows you to do it? So seems like a
Yeah.
no-brainer to me.
Yeah. What would be the Bad Bunny halftime show versus the Great Patriot halftime show?
Yeah,
And
it's a tough one.
yeah, there you go. Easy choice for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Garrett, you posted an article on X about this retired LSU mass comm professor, Robert Mann. He was responding to Governor Landry's call to erect a statue of Charlie Kirk on LSU's campus. And that former professor called Charlie a white nationalist, compared him to David Duke. What has been the response at the university, like within the student body, about that kind of remark?
Yeah, I think, and I'll say this, LSU has been the forefront of Louisiana of supporting Charlie after his assassination.
Wow.
And I'll give props to Governor Landry. It's been amazing to see. They are doing some huge things to support and to further his teachings on that campus. So it's really awesome. The students are 100% behind the movement. Obviously, you can't make a sweeping generalization, but I would say easily the majority of the campus would support it and have no problem with it. And I saw an interesting point brought up is why Charlie at why Louisiana State University. And that's a fair point is, what did he do for Louisiana? But I think it's more the fact that it is just a symbol of freedom of speech. It is a symbol of what institution should be. And so to see that from our flagship university in Louisiana, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I wouldn't think many would. And in fact, I think it would be awesome.
Yeah. It'd be nice to have people like Bob Mann, instead of hiding behind a keyboard and making comments like this, inviting an open and public dialogue at
Yeah, absolutely.
LSU in the spirit of Charlie Kirk. But they won't do that. They're willing to aggrandize themselves, indoctrinate impressionable young people, but they're not really willing to put what they say on the line in an open and public and fair debate. I've noticed that. They're basically cowards. They're
Yeah.
cowards who bully students who are there to learn and are uniquely vulnerable. And to me, I find it absolutely despicable. Which I would have more respect for Bob Mann, despite the vile nature of his opinions, if he would at least be willing to have an open and honest debate about it. But they won't do that.
No, they won't. And you're absolutely right. I would be so much more I would have so much more respect for him if he was, on this call trying to talk about his opinions or what he believed or making any attempt to do so. And it's unfair to the university as well as our state, all the people who pay tuition to go there, because again, it draws an unfair generalization of what the belief is at the university. And like I said, you obviously have those people who want to do the indoctrinating, who are on the bad side, and it's the Robert Manns of Louisiana State who are the problem. But it's not the majority, I'd say, and it is unfair that in a time where there's an attempt to change the narrative, you start seeing these people really try to stick to their guns, and I think that's what it is. There's an obvious sweeping support of Charlie and what he taught generally since everything has happened, and I think it's just a fear thing. Is say whatever I can to try to turn everybody off to him as quick as possible, and it really
Yeah.
just turns around to bite you in the butt.
Well, and
Yeah,
Charlie was one of the biggest advocates for not using ad hominem attacks, right? He wanted the facts were always on his side. And that's what these liberals, not just liberals, but people who want to make these kind of baseless attacks, that's exactly what they're doing. They can't debate because the truth is not on their side, the facts are not on their side. They have nothing to back up any of their statements except for maybe some TikTok videos of other people telling them that very subject.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right, and especially with things like this, the attacks and how personal they are, and especially what it means to our state. To compare Charlie to somebody who brought was I'd say easily a stain on the history of Louisiana, and nobody defends what he taught, or the way he let out his political career. Nobody agrees with that. And I think it is easy to sit here and say we condemn David Duke. At least I do.
Yeah.
And I don't Charlie. And I support Charlie 100%. And the teachings are two totally different things. And so to your point, it's hypocritical, it's baseless, it's rude. It really is. It's just a personal attack. It's being a bully.
Yeah.
and there are students at LSU, probably a lot of them, who will comply, will be influenced by comments like that. A lot of students. In other words, for every, I would say this, and I'd be interested to get your thought on this, guy. I would say for every Garrett DeViney on a college campus, there may be 40 or 50 or 60 people who need a Garrett DeViney in order to have the courage and the inspiration to be able to speak up. Do you think that is it a majority of students on campuses? And I know this is anecdotal. You don't have any scientific data for this, but I would imagine there are a lot of students on campuses across the country who agree with you on most things, but out of fear or a compulsion to comply or whatever it is, just don't speak up.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that's majority of our state, Chris, is young men and women who were raised right, and were raised with these Southern ethics that kind of just seep into the culture around here. And I think a lot of people are on the right side of things, raised, growing to church, or have some type of faith or belief in what it means to be faithful, and are absolutely scared to speak up, as well as all over the nation. It has become the fun, hip, cool thing to target conservatives, which it's quite backwards. I can't really put my finger on it. It doesn't make sense to me, especially as we see the conservative movement grow in number, we still see the attacks ramp up. So I don't really know how that makes sense or how it works, but it does. And it is given this small voice a big microphone to keep a bunch of people down. And that's what it is. And we need to stop acting like the attacks are okay. People, like we talked about, people need to be fired from jobs for breaking their codes of conduct. These actions do need to have consequences. And that's not
Yeah.
to say you don't have your First Amendment right. You of course do. You cannot threaten to kill people. You cannot threaten to be exposing all this private information about these students, or as well celebrating the death of somebody by making ugly remarks like gestures towards your neck that we saw so much in the coming months. So all these things lead to an extremely aggressive political climate for conservatives, especially for the youth. They don't want to risk losing your job. I mean, why would you risk losing your entire livelihood by speaking out for something that's true in college? If I wasn't working for Turning Point USA, I probably wouldn't be saying the things I'm saying right now either. And that's why I'm so blessed to be able to tell that to young students, is that you shouldn't have to fear saying the truth. If I walk into a job interview and don't want to call the person sitting on the other side of me a girl because they're clearly a biological man, that should not affect my livelihood. And the unfortunate truth is that it without a doubt does affect people's livelihoods right now.
Yeah.
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 What do you
100%.
think, Garrett, is the ultimate goal of these Marxist administrators? Is it to turn students into Marxists? Is it to teach them to hate our Constitution, to hate our government, to hate our founding fathers? Is that the underlying message of this?
I think we're in a battle of good and evil, and I think it's to turn people away from Christ. Christianity is what strengthens our nation. It's what our nation was founded on, and it is when we are our best, or just in our Judeo-Christian faith together. Just having a faith, similar beliefs makes us a stronger person, makes us a stronger community, makes us a stronger nation. And so when you have these teachers and administrators who want to teach you these political ideologies that are being practiced in foreign places like communism. They try to teach you that communism is a good idea. No one would be happy living in China. None of these people believing these things on campus think that socialism's a good idea. And they often don't know that socialism hasn't ever been put to practice, that it's an impossible theory. A lot of it is just the unfortunate part. These students don't know how to look deeper. They don't know what they're being told. They're being told these big words like being a Marxist is a good thing, and then all of a sudden you're walking around saying you're a Marxist, and it really is that simple. And so
It
to answer
really
your
is.
question, it is to
It's
take
the
people away from Christ.
yeah, the
Yeah.
definition of indoctrination for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Garrett, how can people support people who are watching? How can they best support the movement? How can they support the work that you're doing? Aside from, if you're obviously a Loyola or Tulane grad, get your pens ready and send a strongly worded letter and a voided check, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of the ways to get involved across the board. If you're 18 through 26, find your closest chapter. If you're not on a college campus, you can, of course, if it's a public university, of course, I urge you to still go and enjoy those chapter meetings. If you're not, reach out. We can find something closest to you. So if you're in the ages of 18 through 26, you should be a part of a chapter, be part of working in the grassroots movement, tabling in front of other students, really just putting the word out. The grassroots is so overlooked, and it really is important. So for the youth, get involved. And for community members who are out of college and working, please just be willing to support the chapters if they need finger sandwiches for a meeting. It's really all the little stuff that people don't think about. So just be an open ear to your chapter leaders nearby. Write an email just offering your help. And a lot of the times you'd be surprised the chapter leaders are happy to put you to work.
Yep.
The
Awesome.
work you're doing, Garrett, is so vital, so incredibly important, and it's an inspiration to have had you with us today. We wish you the best of luck going forward, and who knows where you may be 20 or 25 years from now. We may be driving campaign signs into the ground, Garrett DeViney for governor. You never know.
Hey, you never know. That would be awesome. But we've got a long way until then, a big fight to win. And, that fight's on the ground.
And we're all up to the challenge.
That we are. Yes, sir. Thank y'all so much for having me.
God
Thank
bless
you,
you.
Garrett. God bless you.
God bless y'all.
What an encouragement, Chris, to see a young man so articulate, so solid in his faith and I don't know, clear-eyed about what needs to be done, why we're doing what we're doing, why he believes what he believes. It's just a big encouragement to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the battle is massive,
Yeah.
that he's in, that Turning Point USA on college campuses, especially. I mean, that is really the heart of the beast.
Yeah, and one of the things he said that, he talked about the fact that as the conservative movement gets bigger and more vocal, that the other side gets bigger and more vocal, or maybe not bigger, but more vocal, and they get more attention. And that is, again, that's just a tactic of the enemy. I mean, obviously, the devil has no interest in seeing all of these powerful young men and women come into a recognition of how powerful they truly are, and that they actually do have more power than the enemy. He doesn't want them to know that. That's why silencing people has been the number one tactic of this entire decade.
Exactly. Because the enemy does not want us to know how powerful we really are.
Yeah.
And for that reason, uh, the enemy wants us to be separated from God, because really that's how we know and learn how powerful we really are together, is through our relationship with God. So you're exactly right, Danielle. We are more powerful, but they don't want us to know that. And what's going on at Loyola right now, as far as the chapter there,
It's an embarrassment.
it is a complete and total embarrassment to everything that academic institutions are supposed to stand for. I mean, do they not understand that they are defiling the very purpose of their existence traditionally? And that's supposed to be the bastion of free expression, college universities, where you can explore every idea, every thought, and come to your own conclusions. Basically, they're supposed to be teaching you how to think, not what to think.
Yeah.
And they're doing just the opposite.
Yeah, 1,000%. And Chris, you might know this because you have college age boys, but do TOPS or TOPS scholarships accepted at some of these private institutions? Do they go toward your tuition?
I
Maybe not
believe,
covering all of it, because
I be,
that would surely be an Achilles heel for silencing speech.
yeah, I believe they do, Danielle.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to give the email address, if I could, while I have it, to the president of Loyola. His name is Dr. Xavier Cole, and
If you
he,
spell it, I'll put it up, Chris.
yeah, it's Xavier,
Mm-hmm.
and the last name is Cole, Cole. He's the president of Loyola University, and his email is pr
Oh, okay. Hold on. PRES.
at loyno dot edu. And I would encourage people to send him an email to Dr. Cole and express your displeasure with the institutional censorship that's occurring at Loyola University in banning TPUSA from their campus. I mean, it's interesting. Dr. Cole's dissertation for his PhD was titled "An Examination of the Development of Lay Leadership on Jesuit Catholic University Campuses: How Mission and Identity Programs at U.S. Jesuit Universities Prepare Future Lay Leaders." Well, I would suggest to Dr. Cole that if this is how you're preparing future lay Catholic leaders in the Jesuit tradition, you are horribly failing at your job. Horribly failing at your job. And it's time to read something that St. Ignatius Loyola, perhaps the spiritual exercises, perhaps a biography of Ignatius Loyola, so you can learn something about what he really taught and what he really believed, because you're defiling his legacy. You are defiling his legacy by allowing this to occur on your campus and not saying anything about it.
Yeah.
It's a disgrace.
And you know what, Chris? I think as we look at these universities, you see the problem seems so insurmountable, right? These Marxist minded professors are entrenched in the not only in the classroom, but in the administration, and the entire bureaucratic apparatus is pretty infiltrated. The only thing I can think of, I mean, obviously a move of God, but the groundswell of students being so opposed and so rebellious against those kinds of teachings we'll flush them out, because there's no flushing them out from the outside. Jeff Landry can't do anything. He can't fire all the professors. He can't fire the president of the university, who he's got a contract, or he, I think, has a
Yeah,
contract. So it's up to the students to rise up and become so insufferably righteous, so insufferably opposed to these teachings, that they just want to leave on their own.
exactly. Can you imagine if there were droves of people who followed Garrett's example
Well,
and
there's
just
one. Yeah,
left college and went in
that's
went
right.
and did something else, and combined with big donors just not giving money to the universities anymore, Danielle, as you mentioned before the show, I think that would get their attention. But ultimately and fundamentally, I think you're right. This is about students who associate with these other students on campuses changing hearts and minds. And that's ultimately what will cause, I think, the change. Governor Landry can put a band-aid on it. He might be able to do something to force the school to allow the chapter, or to get a statue of Charlie Kirk down at LSU, that sort of thing. But ultimately, that's just putting a band-aid on it. That's not really changing the hearts and the minds, and that's what we need. And really, that's what Charlie Kirk was all about.
Yeah. And what else we could really strongly suggest, Chris, is that the legislature starts putting some parameters around how funds get sent to these universities. I mean, if you're promoting DEI, you shouldn't be getting funds. If you're promoting anti-constitutional principles, you shouldn't get funds from the state. I mean, why should the taxpayers be funding the indoctrination of our own children?
Exactly. Why should taxpayers be funding the institutional censorship of constitutionally protected speech?
Yeah.
Why should we be funding that,
Yeah.
Danielle? I think that would be a great subject for legislation. No
Yeah.
question about it. Yeah, we're the state legislature. We can't control what purely private institutions do. That is a fair statement. But if you are relying in whole or in part on federal or state money, our money, that makes you a quasi public institutions, and we can absolutely impose constraints upon your ability to bludgeon the Constitution and not pay a price for it.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, there's a couple things that have been going on otherwise in the state. We just concluded a special session, which was kind of below the radar. What happened?
Well, nothing really, except the legislature
Sounds
moved.
useful.
Yeah, the legislature moved the primary date, 2026 primaries, from April to May, so that the U.S. Supreme Court, can make a decision on the constitutionality of Cleo Field's district here, and really the constitutionality of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act altogether, and give the legislature time to redraw a constitutionally acceptable map. And that's basically all that occurred. There was a bill that Mike Bayham brought that we talked about a show or two ago that would have required there to be a final runoff if in a primary no candidate gets a majority of the votes.
Yeah.
Right now they can still go in on a plurality, but his bill would have required a final runoff among the top two vote getters, and his bill didn't go through. So hypothetically, as of now, if Cassidy looks at his Senate race and realizes, well, I can't win a Republican primary under any circumstances, and I believe that's the case. He knows he can't, so I'm going to get out of the Republican Party before qualifying, and I'm going to become just unaffiliated and no party. I'm going to skip the primary, and then I'm automatically going to be in the general election with the winner of the Democrat primary and the winner of the Republican primary, and I'll be in it as an unaffiliated. And if I can squeak out enough votes from the Democrat and enough votes from moderate Republicans, then I can squeeze back into the U.S. Senate on a plurality. I don't even have to get a majority. Bayham's bill would have precluded that and required a final runoff in that scenario.
Why did it not pass, Chris? What kind of treachery?
Because of Republicans. Because
Well,
of
no kidding.
Republicans. The reason why as a matter of principle, we supported the legislation. The reason why we were not overly involved in it is because it's my view that Bill Cassidy is dead in the water no matter what he does. I don't think he has a chance, but I still, yeah, I don't understand why Republicans would
But on
not have.
principle, this is a
Yeah,
bill that should have just gone through. I mean, even if it's just for self-preservation of self-interested politicians.
exactly, exactly. But you have to understand also, Danielle, we're dealing with a legislature, at least the leadership in the state Senate, that tried to sneak in an amendment to a bill last session that would have eliminated the second Republican primary altogether to help
That's
Bill
so
Cassidy.
disgusting.
So
You're
he could
right.
have just won. He could have gotten into the general election on a plurality without even having to go through a
So
second
it's Cameron
Republican primary.
Henry,
Yeah, I'm sure
basically.
it's Cameron Henry, and obviously our governor Jeff Landry. I guarantee you, he didn't weigh in on this. There's
Well, you
no.
know what? It's surprising he didn't, because didn't he put up Representative Julie Emerson to run for Senate?
I don't have any empirical data to confirm that, but he probably did.
Probably.
But
I mean, they've been working hand in glove since he got the governorship,
yeah, I don't think she would have gotten in the race if he had not given it his
encouraged it.
blessing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think so. Speaking of which, Danielle, I think that that probably hurts on balance. Her entry into the race probably hurts Blake Miguez because they're both from Acadiana. They're both
Yeah.
from that area over there, and I know that Julie Emerson is pretty well thought of there, and I think by and large she's been a pretty good legislator. By no means perfect, believe me, but she's done some good things in the legislature, particularly as it comes to the pro-life issue, school choice issues, and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how her entry plays out here. But I don't think that Blake Miguez is probably thrilled that she's in the race.
Well, it never fails to amaze me how Republicans can crowd out our own field and seem to play some kind of circular firing squad when it comes to elections. It makes no sense to me, but we'll see. I mean, at least we have a Republican primary, right?
At least we have a Republican primary, Danielle, but I couldn't agree more that, this internecine warfare that has always crippled our party because so few are willing to put the best interests of the state, the best interests of the Constitution, the best interest of the citizens before their own personal ambition. And that is the root of so much of our problems in Republican politics.
Yeah.
Selfishness and personal ambition triumph over what is best for the good for our state, the greater good,
Yeah.
routinely over and over and over again. So quite frankly, when you have a guy like John Fleming, and I've disclosed, that LACAG and I support John Fleming for the U.S. Senate for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that he's one of the few public figures in the last 20 years who actually made a decision based upon the best interest of our state rather than his own personal ambition, because he was going to run against Mary Landrieu a number of years ago, and he probably would have become a U.S. Senator then, but he did not run because the now ignominious Bill Cassidy announced that he was going to run against Mary Landrieu, and we didn't know anything about Bill Cassidy at the time. But John Fleming specifically decided not to run because he thought his entry would crowd the field and increase the likelihood that Mary Landrieu would return to Washington, D.C. So he subordinated his own personal ambition for the good of the state. We need more people who do things like that rather than simply see what's in it for me, what's in it for me. That's the nature of the problem.
Yeah. Well, speaking of what's in it for me, there's a lot of missing what's in it for me from the New Orleans budget. There's a huge shortfall thanks to Latoya the Destroyer. And she now has her hat in her hand, and as she's going to the state saying, look, we don't know what happened to this money. We can't be held responsible. Can you please pick up the tab for my big bill?
What an absolute fiscal mess. We have a
It was $160 million.
Well, no, the chief administrative officer under Cantrell 6 months ago said that we'll have a $160 million or $125 million surplus at the end of the year. So now it went from that to $125, $130 million debt. How does that occur? This is just a fiscal mess in New Orleans. They tax every possible thing they can tax. They have a massive GDP, a massive budget. Yet
Some places you can't even find pavement. You go into parts of the quarter, it's literally dirt roads because they've done no work on the roads. Where is that money going?
where is the money going? And it is absolute fiscal mismanagement that is occurring there in New Orleans. So if they want the state to bail them out, then there have to be, as Paul Hurd has said, suggested to us, there've got to be some conditions associated with this. They have to surrender, temporarily surrender management of their budget to the state, to the attorney general, to our governor, to our treasurer. Give the state control over your finances for a period of time. You need to enter into a binding financial agreement whereby you agree to prioritize crime, roads, and critical infrastructure needs in New Orleans that you have to spend the money on, you have to prioritize, and things like that. But the idea of New Orleans being able to come to the coffers of the state, get bailed out, and continue to do things exactly the way they've been doing them for 50 years that have put them in this rut is absolutely not acceptable.
The state has to mandate a forensic audit and a criminal investigation.
Yes, Danielle, I'm so glad you brought that. There needs to be an independent third party Doge audit of every aspect of the fiscal affairs of the city of New Orleans. Speaking of which, isn't that the reason why Governor Landry commissioned and formed Louisiana Doge? Wouldn't this be a perfect opportunity for Louisiana Doge to get involved in this, make sure this audit, a meaningful, deep audit occurs and correct the problem at the root here? I haven't heard anything from Louisiana Doge on this, but how do you do anything to solve this problem if you don't know what the source of the problem is?
That's
And
right.
how can you learn that if you're not doing a deep forensic dive into this? How can you possibly learn that?
Yeah. And Chris, I seem to recall I'm pretty sure I recall Dr. Cade Brumley coming on the show, or maybe it was John Fleming coming on the show and talking about the fact that they were able to put some fiscal watch on the New Orleans school system. They did it on all the public schools, right? And so there was
Yes.
a huge leakage, if I recall, fiscal leakage, a really, really bad shortfall of the New Orleans public school system until this happened. And now they have the ability to watch those funds. The entire public has the ability to watch those funds. So why shouldn't the same exact thing be done to the city's affairs?
Across the board.
Yeah.
Across the board, transparency and accountability across the board. But as long as we're in a
I want to
situation,
know how much money LaToya expenses every single day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I mean, let's just start there. How much is she spending on her personal transportation? Like
yeah,
if we start adding those things up, how many contracts have been awarded to family members and friends, close associates? These are things that need to be tracked down.
no doubt about it. I don't think there's ever been, an institution or an entity in our state that has operated for so long with so little accountability and so little transparency.
Except for the government. I will just say, except for the entire government.
Yeah. So I guess the city of New Orleans is perhaps a microcosm of the government as a
Exactly.
whole. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the government is well managed.
Yeah, but clearly, as long as the fox is guarding the hen house in New Orleans, nothing will change. So I think Paul Hurd is 100% correct. We shouldn't be bailing them out unless we attach very significant enforceable conditions to that bailout.
Yeah, and maybe this needs to be a call to action, Chris.
Yeah,
Maybe it can go to the Senate Finance or appropriations. Maybe who's going to have to sign off on this ultimately? I guess it'd be appropriations and Governor Landry, and
yeah,
Senate Finance. So maybe
yeah.
we should. point some
Those would
messaging
be
to them.
those would be the committees, and I think that would be, you know, and I don't know, to be honest with you, whether or not Governor Landry has weighed in on this, but he needs to weigh in on this. It's that
Yeah.
important. New
Yeah,
Orleans
it is.
is a hugely important city in our state, and it's just not what it should be. Not what it
No,
should be.
absolutely. People should feel safe to go there again. As just
Absolutely.
as a starting point. I
Yeah.
mean, come on. Just a couple of announcements, Chris. Actually, just one announcement that we will be back here on Tuesday, picking up the hot topic of carbon capture and sequestration and related issues in Louisiana with an attorney, Alan Pesnell. I believe he's one bringing the case for a coalition of people who are trying to get this nonsense of eminent domain stopped before their property gets seized.
Yeah, that is a hugely, hugely important suit. I don't know if the suit's dropped yet or not, Danielle, but I know that it will be. And yeah, and the core issue in that case is whether or not carbon capture sequestration, the use of eminent domain for carbon capture sequestration, whereby these private organizations are allowed to seize private property for this venture, whether or not that violates the Louisiana Constitution's core right of private property. And it's a big issue, and I think they've got a very strong case. If it's handled right and there's a fair decision made on it. So, and it will have implications across the state. So it's a huge, huge case. I don't
Yeah.
think there's any issue in the state right now, Danielle, that is more important than the issue of carbon capture sequestration, because it directly impacts our money, because this enterprise is being subsidized with billions of dollars of our money. It impacts our property rights, as we just talked about, and it impacts the health of our citizens because of the potential dangers associated with permanently burying CO2 under the ground. When mixed with water and salt, becomes carbonic acid, which is a carcinogen. It's a toxic. And so all of those issues are entwined in carbon capture sequestration. That's why it's such a huge, huge issue in the state.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, I look forward to talking with Alan.
Yeah, it should be a great interview, and we'll have more info. Isn't there, I believe there's a hearing coming up, Chris? Is there another town hall coming up on maybe November 4th? I could be making that
Yeah,
up.
no, there is one coming up on November 4th. I don't know exactly where it is, but we'll be posting about these things on our Facebook page, LACAG, and then at LACAG on our X page as well. So there'll be plenty of information out there about that. But I really do feel, Danielle, that the pendulum is starting to swing way back in favor of Louisiana citizens on this issue. And I really think that as goes carbon capture sequestration, and as goes whether or not the candidates are going to really express publicly how they feel about this and commit to a position, so goes their candidacy and their campaigns. I think people are going to be paying very close attention to this.
Yeah, well, I want to see this issue get so big that pendulum hits some politicians square in the face, because I just think the treachery, the absolute disdain for the public that these politicians have shown while they have sold us down the river, a river that's soon to be poisoned by carbon, under pressure carbon that becomes carbonic acid. I'm just so frustrated by the whole thing. So I do want to see some serious political fallout whenever the people win on this.
And there and will be, and we will continue to publicize how our Republican legislators voted on critical issues related to carbon capture sequestration, because we shouldn't be in this position, Danielle. We should not be in this position where citizens across the state, particularly in rural communities, are having sleepless nights, night after night after night, wondering whether or not they really are sovereigns and masters of their own property. That should
That's right.
not be occurring in our state. Our legislature had an opportunity to take care of this, and they failed to do so, despite the heroic efforts of some of them. And there was a guy that I met at a town hall the other night, Danielle, who has land in, I believe it's Kinder. He has not slept in 8 months He has not slept in 8 months because of this looming threat over generational property in his family. Think about that. And it
It's
makes me wonder how politicians are able to sleep at night.
they sleep on a pile of cash, Chris. You didn't know that?
Well, I guess it's very soft and very comfortable, but
Yeah.
there's something in the Psalms that say, you may lie on your comfortable beds and lounge on your comfortable couches for now, but there will be a day of reckoning and a day of justice. And I believe that it's coming on this issue in this state at this time. What a great time to be alive, Danielle.
It is. It is. And I just want to remind all of our listeners to give us a thumbs up for this episode. If you haven't yet, give us a rating on whatever platform you watch us or listen to us. Share it with your friends. And if you can, support us. Support the State of Freedom at freedomstate.com.
Yeah, let us advertise. Let us advertise your business or whatever it is that you're doing. Let us promote it for you because we will promote it from the heart. We try it. We like it. Let me tell you what, nobody will motivate people like us. So give us a shot and we'll make you proud. And Danielle, as always, it's a pleasure to be with you. Every single time we have a show together, it always goes by so quickly. I guess it's because we're having fun.
We are having fun. We're having
Yeah.
so much fun. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Well, God bless you, Danielle. And in the words of the great William F. Buckley, the late great William F. Buckley Jr., inveighing we shall go.
We shall. God bless you, Chris. I'll see you on Tuesday.
You too.
The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of men, women, and teens are experiencing around the world with the Slenderize drops. These homeopathic hormone-balancing drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. To learn more about the drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at danielle@freedomstate.us or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Hey, Danielle Walker here. I'd love for you to check out my online boutique, Lux Lion. My mission for Lux Lion is to showcase innovative African designers and sustainable mission-driven brands. To do that, I bring you stunningly beautiful handcrafted jewelry and accessories from some of my absolute favorite places on earth. Small batch wholesale for storefronts is also available. Join me in celebrating African artistry and shop now at luxlion.us. Use promo code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your purchase. Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.